Hey, everybody.
Hello. Thank you for joining today's Mailgun Hangout featuring our lead digital product designer, Lee Monroe. Lee is heavily involved in the digital design and user community and is an author for publications like Smashing Magazine. He's a mentor for groups like Lean Startup Machine, and he recently spoke at FluentCon. Today, he's going to be providing tips on how to create HTML templates, and he'll be demoing lots of examples using various tools. Hey, Lee.
Hey, Angela. Thank you.
And
Let me take it from here.
we also have Alan here, who leads our Rackspace community, and he's going to be helping with moderations. Alan, how can people submit questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. There's a couple of different ways that you can join in on the Hangout fun here. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can just drop a comment into the comment section on YouTube. That's what it was built for, I think, just to provide the internet with a place to comment. You can also use the question and answer app directly from within this Hangout. Just go ahead and put in your question, and we'll be monitoring those as we go along. More than happy to answer those as we go. You can also drop a comment with the hashtag Mailgun Hangout, I think is what we're
Twitter.
using. Mailgun Hangout on Twitter. That's right. And we're just going to monitor them all. We've got people in place to monitor them. So feel free to jump in and contribute to the conversation. We really want to make this a good learning experience. And these questions are a great way to do that. So I think we're probably ready to turn it over to Lee now.
Yep. Ready, Lee?
Yeah, thanks for the intro, guys. So just let me share my screen here. And you guys should see a deck. How's that look?
Oh, there it is. All right, great.
That's good.
All right, awesome. Cool. So today we're going to talk about HTML email. So if you're joining us, I'm going to assume that you've had some previous experience trying to work with HTML email. And I'm going to assume that probably 99.99% of you, it wasn't a good experience. So we're going to look at that today. So a little bit about me to start with. So I'm from a wee country called Northern Ireland, if you're wondering where the accent's from. And there's three things that our tourist board is very proud of. So one, Belfast, our capital city, is where the Titanic was built. So obviously that didn't end up so well, but we're very proud of that fact. Two, Belfast is also supposedly hosts a hotel that is the most bombed hotel in Europe. It's called the Europa, and President Clinton actually stayed there back in the 90s. And thirdly, these days, Belfast and Northern Ireland plays host to Game of Thrones. So a lot of Game of Thrones scenes are filmed there. Unfortunately, it's not the warm, sunny scenes of King's Landing. It's the cold, miserable scenes of Winterfell, mostly filmed there. But these days I reside and work in San Francisco, so I'm leading design for Mailgun, which is a service by Rackspace. It's a bunch of APIs that developers send, receive, and track email. So our expertise is email deliverability, email reputation, and we provide the infrastructure to manage all that. And today we're going to look at another problem that developers face when it comes to email, and that's HTML email templates. So over my time at Mailgun, I've had the pleasure of open sourcing a bunch of projects that I've worked on, some email templates, email boilerplate, and a workflow. And developers seem to like it. In fact, it has been claimed that the workflow will make your life 100 times easier. So we're going to look at that a little bit later today. Quick agenda. So I'm going to start by looking at the state of HTML email in 2015. And we're going to look at solutions to building HTML email. We're going to cover design systems for email. And we're going to look at automating your build system. And then I'm going to do a demo of the Grunt workflow that I just mentioned. So to give you a little bit of background on my experience with email, whenever I joined Mailgun, we were sending a lot of emails like this. So they were all pretty much plain text, all our transactional emails. So they kind of lacked hierarchy, they lacked urgency, they lacked branding, the call to action wasn't clear. So one of my first projects whenever I joined Mailgun was to work on this email that we would send users when they signed up, and then they would have to activate their Mailgun account. So I thought this was a great opportunity to design an HTML email template. So I came up with this really basic design. It looks like this. We're talking of like a container, a couple of paragraphs, and a button. The HTML looked like this. You've got a div here, we've got a few paragraphs, and our button. Very simple. And the CSS looked like this. Just some styles there to make it look good. So it looks great, looks simple, ship it, right? Then I used Litmus to test out my email. So if you haven't heard of Litmus, Litmus is an indispensable tool when it comes to building email templates. I send Litmus my HTML email, and then Litmus will show me how that looks across all the different email clients out there. Clients like Outlook, Gmail, on all the different mobile apps. So I sent Litmus my email and checked it in Apple Mail. It looks pretty good, just as I was expecting. Checked it on the iPhone, again, it looks respectable. Checked it on Outlook 2002. So here we've lost the round corners, but we can live with that. It's still a usable email. Checked it on Outlook 2013. So now things are starting to look a bit dodgy. So we've got some background color issues here. We've got some width issues, some padding issues. The button seems to have collapsed on itself. So starting to look a bit dodgy. And I checked it in, one of the greatest web apps of our time, Gmail, and the styles didn't even seem to show up. No styles were rendered at all. So HTML email, it's a pretty painful subject. It's like web development back in the 90s. Remember the browser wars back then? It's kind of like that, except we've got even more email clients to worry about. 30 plus clients and ISPs like Outlook, Gmail, Apple, Yahoo, AOL. And they all use different rendering engines. Some use WebKit, some use Internet Explorer, some even use Microsoft Word to render your HTML email templates. And in 2014, mobile open rates went over 50%. So now support across all these different devices is more important than ever. Litmus released a monthly report called Email Client Share, and they break down each of the clients. And this is based on their own internal numbers. So iPhone is responsible for 26%, and Gmail at 18%, iPad at 12%, followed by Outlook and Apple. So a lot of Apple devices in there, followed by Gmail, and then Outlook is still very relevant. And these will change depending on what your market, what your recipients are using. So I encourage you to look at your own metrics to get a baseline for that. So when it comes to HTML email, we can't rely on divs because divs are unpredictable with positioning, multi-column layouts, and floating. Widths are unreliable. We can't use style sheets. External style sheets are stripped and ignored. Styles in our head are ignored by the likes of Gmail. CSS3 support varies. It's different for different rendering engines, so a property like border radius might work on Apple Mail, but it won't work on Outlook. HTML5, very similar to CSS3, support varies across all the different clients. So an element like video will show up on iOS, but if you look at it in Gmail, the video element would not work. There's no JavaScript support in HTML email. Most of the clients out there, or a lot of the clients out there, disable images by default. So we have to design HTML emails assuming images are off. So a client like Gmail, which actually just recently started showing images by default, your images will show up, but in Outlook, the end user will have to opt in by clicking another button to show images. So that brings us on to solutions for HTML email. So we're going to look at that next. We're going to take a short break just now to welcome anyone else that has just joined.
Yeah, hey, just to welcome everybody, and looks like we've got quite a few people that have joined here in the last couple of minutes. I just wanted to say welcome, first of all, and thanks for joining us. But also, if you want to participate in this and drop a question or a comment, there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. We really encourage you to participate with us. So the first and probably the easiest way is while you're watching here in the Google Hangout, you can go ahead um, and just drop a question into the Q&A section. So, for example, we actually have one here from Skip Bieber, who asks, is there any way that we can get a copy of the slide deck? Lee, is that available to the public?
Sure, yes. I can provide a copy of the deck after this for sure.
And just that easily, we can answer your questions for you. So just drop us a question there. It's probably the easiest way to do it, but if you're on Twitter, kind of multi-screening it, you can drop us a question with the hashtag CloudQA. You can also use the comments directly in YouTube, and we'll get them down there for us. Back to you, Lee.
Cool. So we covered all those problems with email, all the different clients, all the different ISPs, and how they're all using different rendering engines. So with all these hurdles and restrictions with email clients, like how do we go about building HTML emails without them falling apart? Well, first on the list is tables. You know what you're thinking, Lee, you're crazy. I haven't used tables back since 1999 when I was using front page. But we have to use tables these days, and table cells. And Kevin Mandeville, a designer at Litmus, he has this great saying where he says TD or GTFO. And what that means is TD or get to fixing Outlook. So if you don't use tables and table cells, and you'll spend all your time troubleshooting and banging your head against the wall trying to fix Outlook. The second key thing is inlining your CSS. So I mentioned previously that most clients will ignore any external style sheets, and some clients like Gmail will ignore CSS that isn't inlined. So you have to change the way you write HTML and CSS. So here's how you might typically style a button for a website. We've got a block of CSS, and we've got an anchor tag styled like a button. When it comes to email, we have to use our tables and cells, and we have to inline the CSS. So we've got a table going on, we've got a table cell, and we've got all this CSS inlined. And even more than that, we have to be repetitive about our inline CSS because different clients inject different inline styles for different properties. With some good news, we can use conditional statements to target different clients. So we can target different versions of Outlook, for example. If we wanted to target more modern Outlook versions, we can use if MSO because they're using Word to render your emails. If we wanted to target older versions of Outlook, we can use if IE. And if we wanted to target a specific version of Outlook, for example, 2007, we can use the version number, which would be version 12. So within these if statements, we can put HTML that only shows to those particular clients, and other clients will not render those things. We can also target WebKit clients, so Apple Mail, iOS. We can use a specific WebKit media query that only targets those clients. So then we can put some elements within our HTML and then use CSS to hide, show, or modify those elements for WebKit clients. Of course, we can also use these media queries to target different sizes of screens and different devices. So if we wanted to target a mobile phone, for example, we can put in some styles to hide, show, or modify elements on those particular screens. So here's a couple of examples. So this is a receipt that I receive from Uber a few times a week. So whenever I look at this receipt in Apple Mail, this is what I see. So I see two columns. On the left, you've got the route of the map that I took. And on the right, we've got a breakdown of the price, how much it costs. Now, whenever I look at that on my iPhone in the Apple Mail app, it changes to one column. Some other things have changed, like alignment, some padding things, some font sizes. So they've used a media query to make this responsive for the iPhone. However, if I look at the same email in Gmail on the iPhone, I see a zoomed out version of the desktop view. So what we're talking about here is progressive enhancement. We're providing a baseline that works for everyone, but then we're enhancing it for those that support it. So a couple of other examples. Here's a newsletter from Moo, and this is me viewing it in Gmail, so I can see some nice images, some text, and call to actions. But if I was to look at it in Outlook, which doesn't show me images by default, it's still a usable email. I can still read the text. I can still see the call to actions. They weren't overly reliant on images, so it's still usable. And a final example here from Intercom. So Intercom is a great third-party service that lets you interact and communicate with users of your applications. Whenever they release a feature, they'll often include an animated GIF that will look like this to show you how the new feature works. So if I'm looking at it in Gmail, I'll see the animated GIF. But if I look at it in Outlook 2007, which doesn't support GIFs, the GIF falls back to the first frame of the image. So it doesn't break, and to me as an end user, it doesn't look like anything's wrong. It just falls back to the first frame. So it's progressively enhanced for those that do support it. So back to my original task. After a bunch of tables, a bunch of inline styling, and a bunch of litmus testing, I eventually got this very simple email shipped. And it took a lot more effort than I thought just to get this one email working. But with most software and most companies, we don't just send one email. We send lots of emails. We send lots of transactional emails, behavior-based emails, promotional emails. And typically these emails are managed in different places. So some are maybe managed in our code base, some are in a third-party service over here, some are in an email marketing service over there. And whenever you have all these templates that are inlined, making a small change like the color of a button or your logo or a brand color, it's going to be really awkward and unmanageable to do that across the board. Here's a few emails I received from my bank recently. So these are all different emails, and you can look at the different emails and you can see that they're all slightly inconsistent. There's different widths going on here, there's different button styles, there's different margins, there's different typography, slightly different colors. But when you look at a company like Airbnb, they do a great job with their emails. All the buttons, the social media icons, the whole user experience of their emails is slightly more superior and consistent. And so to achieve this polished email experience, we need a workflow and a system. Hand coding every single email with inline CSS is not a scalable solution. And we're getting really good at this for web applications. These days we have pattern libraries, we have reusable components, boilerplates, sets of guidelines. And these are resources for all your team to pull stuff from. Like Bootstrap is a great example of that. We need to apply this to emails. We need to stop delivering one-off emails and think about a design system for them. Dave Rupert, a developer at Parabel, he has this great blog post that he talks about modules, not pages. He talks about breaking it down to the building blocks of what builds up a page. Design components and design modules once they're reusable. And this is particularly relevant in email. So if we apply this practice to the Airbnb examples that we looked at previously, we can think of it not just one static HTML email. We can think of it like a website that has a header and footer. We can break it down even further, so it's modular, where each section is a different module. So we've got a header, a content area, a table, another content area, and a footer with some social sharing icons. So if we treat our email system like a website, we need a framework to do that. I'm a big fan of static site generators like Jekyll, Middleman, and Assemble, because they include the framework for that. They include layouts, includes partials, markdown, handlebars. And you can also create helpers in for each of your different components. So instead of me having to write 3 or 4 tables for a simple call to action button, I can write a helper that I can just write a couple of lines, or 1 line of code, and that helper will generate the HTML for me on build. And these static site generators and this system makes collaboration and version control much easier for your team. Then if you make 1 change across 1 email, it'll be spit out to all your emails. So you've got 1 source of truth. And of course, once you have your HTML email that we talked about, we need to inline our CSS. So once you have your HTML, you inline it. And there's no shortage of inline CSS tools out there. There's Zerb has one, MailChimp has a good one, Campaign Monitor has one. So I can copy and paste my HTML into this input box and it will spit out the inline CSS for me. Then I need to think about, well, what about my images? I want to compress my images, and there's a couple of tools online that can do that, like TinyPNG. So I can upload my images, it'll spit out the compressed images. And then I might want to send each of my emails to Litmus, so I can start a new test, and I can copy and paste the inlined version into Litmus. But at this point, we're doing a lot of manual labor. Having to run all these tasks manually sucks. It's very disruptive to your workflow. So this is where we can introduce some automation. And we can have something like Grunt or Gulp, these different task runners to optimize our workflow and our builds and do all these tasks for us. So let's zoom in on Grunt for a second. Whenever you're using Grunt, you have a Grunt file, which is a JavaScript file. And you can put all the tasks in there that you want Grunt to run for you. And so these are different plugins. And I go back to my command line, I run 1 command, Grunt, and it'll automate all these tasks for me. So your Grunt file looks like this. This block of text would inline your CSS for you. This block of text would compress your images. And then this block of text could send your email to Litmus. So all you're doing here is running 1 command in your command line, Grunt, and it will do all this for you. So you're not copy and pasting back and forth, you're not using different tools that are in your browser. This is all automated. And when you look at the power of Grunt, there's actually lots of other things you can add to this, because before your emails are production ready, there's quite a lot of these little tasks that you have to do, have to think about. So we can add different Grunt plugins to our Grunt file. So if we wanted to generate a plain text version of our email, which it's important to send a plain text version along with your MIME, we can use a plugin that does that for us. So Premailer could handle that. If we wanted to also upload our images to a CDN, to like Rackspace or to AWS, we can add another plugin that manages that for us. If you wanted to send yourself the email or send an email to a colleague for review, we could use a Grunt Mailgun plugin to do that. Like I mentioned, you can automatically send Litmus the emails, so it tests all these emails for you. You can send the templates to your ESP, so if they're hosting the templates for you, you can make use of their API and spit out the templates once they're ready. The benefit of this is you've got 1 source of truth, so you're working on it locally, and then once it's ready, you spit out the HTML email to these ESPs. And you can also include this workflow in your own code base and put it on GitHub so that all your team, all your developers have access to it. So I have a demo for you, so I'm going to look at the Grunt workflow that I'm talking about here specifically. So this is available on GitHub, so this is open source, this is free to download and try out. You go to github.com/LeeMonroe/Grunt email workflow. You'll see it here, and there's a bunch of instructions to help you get started in the README. I'm going to show you a demo of how it works. So once you download that, or once you clone that, here's what your directory structure looks like. The most important file here is the gruntfile.js. So that's the one that includes all the plugins and all the tasks that you want to run when you enter the grunt command. Then in my case, I'm using Assemble, the static site generator, to pull together my HTML templates. I'm using handlebars for the templating. So I've got this default layout, which provides the default header and footer of the email. And I've got two example emails in here. There's a branded example that has an image, and then there's a simple transaction email. So I go to my command line, I enter Grunt, I run that command. You see a bunch of stuff happening. So this is pulling together the HTML templates, it's inlining the CSS, it's compressing the images, it's doing all those tasks that you set in Grunt file. Then once that's done, it spits out a dist folder, and in this folder we have the HTML email templates, and these are ready to go. So the CSS is inlined. We have plain text versions ready to go as well, and we have this image folder which is compressed, ready to upload. And then here's an example of the really simple transactional email template. So that's available on GitHub. Definitely worth checking out and trying it out. This is an example using Grunt. You can use Gulp, which is another task runner, and you could set Gulp up to do exactly the same thing if you prefer Gulp. So it does suck building HTML templates, but we can make use of all of these awesome front-end development tools to make our lives much easier. All we need to do is know the quirks of each of the email clients, apply a modular design system to our workflow, and then automate our workflow using these task runners so you're not repeating yourself. And you might even enjoy starting to design and build HTML email templates. So a couple of last things that I wanted to cover before we finish. Responsive email. So I talked briefly about that before, where I showed this example of how Uber looks in the iPhone Mail app, and then how it looks in Gmail on the iPhone. That's because Gmail, both web and native apps, doesn't support media queries. So media queries don't work in Gmail, web native. So what are the solutions to that? Well, we could stick to a fluid width email. We could stick to a fixed width email, which is really narrow and still usable on small screens. Or there's a couple of solutions out there that use left and right aligned cells so that they collapse on smaller screens. And there's a great tutorial by Nicole Merlin that's available on Tuts Plus, I think is the website. This is URL j.mp/responsive email tut. I recommend you check that out if you're interested in this solution. It's pretty in-depth, so I didn't want to go through it in too much detail today. I recommend you go through that in your own time for a really solid responsive email solution. Gmail Actions. We often get questions about this, so if you use Mailgun, you might have noticed that you have Gmail Actions in the subject line here. GitHub, they're also heavy users of these. Airlines also send these for check-in, that type of thing. So these are great because the call to action is in the subject line, so the user doesn't have to open the email to see what it's about. And it's pretty straightforward to add these to your emails. So you can add them using JSON or microdata. So here's a JSON example. So this chunk of code was just added to the end of our HTML email. And the important parts here are the action parts. So this tells Gmail what type of action it is, so it's a view action. And then we pass the URL. In this case, we're passing a parameter, which is a link, and then the name of the button itself. So this is the text that appears on the Gmail action. So in this case, it's reset Mailgun password. So when a user receives this, they don't have to open the email, they just click on the button that's in the subject line. So once you add this data to your HTML email templates, the next step is to get whitelisted with Google. So Google will require you to get whitelisted in order for these to show up, which is probably the part that takes the longest. And you can find out more information about that on Google's site itself, developers.google.com. pitfalls.com/gmail/markup. Definitely worth looking into. And the last thing that I wanted to mention was pre-header text, because I often see this getting forgot about. So we're talking about the additional line of description here. So if you're looking at Gmail, you've got the sender, and then we've got the subject line, and then we've got this extra description. And we can help define what that extra description says, because these email clients like iPhone or Outlook and Gmail, they're pulling the first line of content that's in your email. So the trick is to provide a hidden line of content that the user won't see when they open the email, but that the email client will pull in and add here. And then you can add some text here that will help encourage the user to open your email and to click through. And to achieve this, we have a hidden line of text that goes to the top of your HTML email. So here, this is how I would implement this pre-header text. So we're making sure that it's really hidden. So we've got a lot of inline CSS here that makes it transparent, make sure it has no width, no height at all, and make sure it's hidden. So it's a rock solid pre-header text right there. Cool. So thanks very much for listening and tuning in. You can follow me on Twitter, Lee Monroe, and I mentioned Litmus a lot during this. So Litmus has been kind enough to give us a code or a voucher for each of our viewers that gives you 1 month free access to their service. You just go to litmus.com/lp/mailgun. You'll be able to take advantage of that 1 month. I heavily recommend it. And lastly, here are all the resources that I mentioned throughout the talk. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. Thank you. That was great. Yeah, really glad to see all those resources, and thanks to Litmus for giving us a free month. That's great. That was watching and didn't hear one of the other announcements. We would like to get your input on this. There's a couple of different ways that you can. We've got a couple of questions that we're going to answer here in just a second. But if anybody else is watching and does have a question, let's get this in here as well. You can use the question and answer app directly from within the Google Plus Hangout, right? So just ask your question and we'll go ahead and answer them there. Drop us a comment on Twitter with #MailgunHangout. YouTube comments work as well. We'll get those if you drop them in there. And of course, we'll follow up afterwards if you have a burning question that we can answer for you on the after the Hangout's over. So thanks, Lee. That was very insightful to me. I mean, I know that there's a lot that goes into creating an email, a nice HTML email, but I really didn't realize that it was that complex and that involved. So I think you did a great job of kind of showing everything that goes into it, and not just that, but showing some ways to make it a little bit easier. That was really good.
Good.
Yep.
So we have our first question from Yang. He's co-founder of MarketSpace. And his question is, can we use HTML templates to execute drip marketing campaigns? And we were trying to understand the context of this question, so not sure if we're referring to Mailgun or not, but Lee, if you want to get a stab at that question.
Sure. So like drip campaigns, so you could use Mailgun's API to set up a system that does drip campaigns for sure, and then you can use our HTML templates that we have on GitHub there to do that. But there's a bunch of services available that are ready to go that I would recommend as well. So Intercom is a great service that lets you do drip campaigns. There's Drip. I think the URL is getdrip.com or .io. There's Vero, ConvertKit. So all these services already exist. So they're all set up, ready to go. And I'm pretty sure you can customize the templates that you use to send them. So I've definitely checked some of those out.
Great. That sounds like a great resource to work with those. We did have a couple of questions here from the Q&A app. We'll start off with Robert's question here. This is a Grunt-specific question. Does Grunt support GET response?
Does it support GET response?
Yes, that looks like an API get response all one word there. It looks like it's like an API parameter or something like that.
I am not sure. So Grunt's based on Node and JavaScript, so I would assume yes. Be interesting to hear what it is you want to do with it.
Great. Let's see. The other question we had was another one from Skip here. Skip has asked specifically about media queries. Would they work in the web version of Office 365? So I'm guessing if you're viewing it on a on a smaller screen, on a tablet or a phone or something like that.
Good question. Office 365. So I'm not sure offhand if they do support it, but I know that anytime I have a question like this, I always look up MailChimp or Campaign Monitor's CSS support site, and they've just got they've got a big long list of all the different CSS properties that there are, and they show you what clients they're supported on. So if I was to try and answer that question, I would look up that site, and that would tell me the answer. I would probably guess that it isn't supported, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, well, great, and that's another great resource to look that up. So.
Yeah, we'll definitely do some research and find answers to those questions, and we'll provide it in our blog post that will also include a link to this recording, along with Lee's deck for your reference, because he did reference a lot of links in his presentation that I'm sure you want to jot down and reference.
Yep. We had another comment here from Rick. Rick wanted to know about Preheader support. Is that only supported in Gmail?
No, it is supported in lots of different clients. So most clients that have a little bit of a preview, that extra description text. So Gmail is one for sure. iOS, the Apple iOS app for email. Different versions of Outlook also have it. I'm sure there's a few more. So definitely take advantage of the Preheader text. It's supported in a few places.
Good. And that was a really neat tip too, just to kind of trick Gmail into showing that information, without it, because yeah, it can seem a little bit abrasive, I guess, if you lead off your emails that way sometimes. So it was a nice way to be a polite marketer, but also to use the tools there. So that was a really cool, cool tip. There was another comment that we had at from actually a couple of days ago when we first mentioned this. Joe Oliver put in a lot of interesting information. It's a very long comment, so I'm not going to read it all out. But if you are, if you're looking at the Google Plus pages on there, just talking a little bit about creating HTML templates via the open source email reader Thunderbird. So I mean, there's another way to do that. Just another interesting way that people are doing that. So lots of neat and interesting ways that people are doing some of the same stuff.
Yeah, out of all the clients that are available, Thunderbird's definitely, I think, the best one to if you want to compose an HTML email, for sure. I would agree.
Great. So this is a question that I had. I had not really considered using some of these static site generators to compile the HTML. But that's a perfect use case for that, especially when you follow your advice to modularize everything and to break it down into different topics and different subsections. And so that works really well. I guess then the question is, how then does that get shipped off to Mailgun, for example, to be sent out, or to another third-party marketing system to get those out?
Yes, it's a great question. And it varies. It depends on what your workflow is. So if you have, let's say you have a Ruby on Rails application, and that's like your core, your stack, your framework that you're using, well, you would integrate email into your Ruby on Rails app differently than you would into a Python application or a Node application. So it kind of really depends on your setup. You might even set up a API service or a microservice that deals with HTML emails yourself. So you could have your build system separate to your mail application, and then that way you've got your email design system, your build system, and you're pushing to your own application. You're pushing to the email marketing service over here. So it definitely varies. Or copy and paste last resort, but of course that comes back to like the manual labor of copying and pasting everything. Or you can include the actual Grunt file and the Grunt workflow in your code base as well. It just puts maybe somewhere separate, but it spits out the email templates where your framework or your language can reference it. So I don't have a concrete answer, just it depends what language and what framework you're using.
Good advice. Good advice. We had some really good input on our last hangout about kind of incorporating those drip emails into your application. So go back and rewatch that one. It's out there on YouTube. Go rewatch that one to kind of and then put these together. So really good advice there.
Well, I think that's it for our questions. Lee, thank you so much for your time and expertise. Like I said to all the listeners out there, we'll be putting this on our blog, blog.mailgun.com. We'll have a link to the recording and to Lee's presentation, along with all the questions that were asked. We'll make sure to have the correct answer along with that question. And if you have more questions, please submit them. You can comment on our blog, or you can comment in the comments on YouTube, because this recording will be on YouTube.
Yep. Hey, and we're doing another one of these.
Yes. Our next hangout is next month, August 26th. I believe that's a Wednesday. And it will be it'll take a deep dive into webhooks. So that should be an interesting topic as well.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Lee. Great to learn all this with you, and I guess we'll see everybody next time.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning
Cheers,
in.
guys. Bye.